Hello again. My name is Ted Burns, and I'm the Senior Director of Political Affairs in RADPAC for the American College of Radiology. I want to welcome you to our RADVOCACY podcast hosted by RADPAC. Our goal with the podcast is to give a behind the scenes look into the various advocacy efforts of the college. And today, as our guest, I'm honored to have Dr. Ty Childs from down in Texas. So, Dr. Childs, welcome. Glad to have you join us. And if you would, please give us a summary of your training background and the practice you're with now in Texas.
Hi, Ted. Thank you for having me here today. I'm a practicing radiologist in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm employed by Radiology Associates of North Texas, which is a large private practice group here in the North Texas area. I started out at Tulane University for college and for medical school, and then moved to Houston, where I did a residency in radiology at the University of Texas Health Science Center. I then did a hybrid fellowship for 1 year and then was assistant professor for 2 years before moving to Fort Worth and starting my current private practice job of the last 39 years.
Great. And I didn't know you had the Tulane hook. Are you from Louisiana?
No, actually, I grew up in Fort Worth. I didn't really have a Texas accent, and then I developed a pretty good New Orleans accent during the 8 years I lived there. And so sometimes I lapse into that accent too.
Gotcha. Well, one of the main reasons we wanted to have you on one of our earlier episodes in our podcast is you're considered really one of our top advocacy gurus in the country. I mean, you've done it all. You've done everything that you can do at the federal level when it comes to advocacy, everything that you can do really at the state level when it comes to advocacy down in Texas. So I guess two questions. One, kind of what is your why? Why are you involved in advocacy? What's the value that you see in it? And then if you could maybe talk about the differences between federal and state, if you see that there are any, or maybe you don't feel like there are at all. That would be helpful, I think, for our audience to hear.
Sure, I'm glad to address that. The why, the funny short answer is our lobbyist for the Texas Radiological Society says you must have a genetic defect to like this stuff. And if you Google my name without the third on it, you'll get my grandfather's name, and you'll find he was a clerk in the House of Representatives in Texas in 1909. So I guess I've got the genetic defect. That's the
Cool.
funny answer. I just find it interesting. I find it important over the time that I've been involved, and I got started late in my career. It just occurred to me at one point, if we're not there standing up for the practice of medicine and what we think is right for patients and for physicians to be able to practice the best medicine possible, then the people that are economically interested and don't want us to succeed, that's a rather harsh way to say it, they're going to be there. They're going to try to get laws and rules passed that would be contrary to what we think would be the best quality medicine. So basically, I feel it's important to be there and be at the table and be able to represent what we think is the right way to practice medicine.
That's
At
great.
this,
And well, just real quick, if I could jump in, I mean, the other
sure.
part about it too, and I don't know how much of this has influenced maybe your reason to get involved, but Texas has a pretty storied history of advocacy within radiology. I mean, you look at Tom Fletcher and Dr. Fletcher, a lot of what he had done for many, many years a while ago, and so many other folks, of course, Dr. Silva. So I don't know if that's part of it as well. But I do feel like there may be some connection where the more that there is of it around you and the more that you can see people already doing it, it's easier to kind of get involved. I don't, is that a safe assumption for me to make?
Actually, yes, it is. Like I said, got involved relatively late in my career, but I showed up at a TRS meeting and Dr. Fletcher was president. And I went up to introduce myself, and he challenged me to get my group to donate to the TRS. And my group stood up and said, yes, we'll do that. And that's when I got involved. And then hanging around with the various people like Dr. Fletcher and seeing what was going on, I got more and more involved. And then it reached a point where I was ready to step up and start taking leadership. And again, it's just a matter of showing up, participating, being aware of what's going on, and deciding that you can do it. Anybody can do it if they really want to. But yes, it's very helpful to have other people. Dr. Mark Montgomery is
Mm-hmm.
another person that
Yep.
had testified at Texas legislative hearings. I remember being at TRS meeting when they came from the Capitol, from testifying, for example, when our meeting was in Austin that year. So you're correct about that. And you asked about the state versus federal. State is very interesting because you can get to know your legislators. You can get to know the Texas Medical Association, which is the 800-pound gorilla in medical
Right.
politics and legislation in Texas, and that's where I've actually gravitated to. And at RADPAC, of course, is very important, and at the federal level, and I have participated in that. Obviously, going to the Capitol Hill Day, and one of my favorite stories that we'll get to in a bit actually has to do with RADPAC and ACR and other entities that I've been involved in.
Okay. So it is interesting too. You mentioned TMA, and I remember from the very beginning of starting at the ACR, 19 so years ago. That was one of the first acronyms I heard, and that was even before AMA. Quite honestly, in the advocacy space, and you want to talk about their history and all that they've been trying to do. Very visible, very active. Obviously, with the recent lawsuit on surprise billing. Not to kind of get off on a tangent, but again, I mean they have a reputation of visibility and engagement, and it's well earned. So that's pretty cool in your state because not every state, as you can guess, has that type of impact and influence and visibility. So
Well,
that's
that's
good.
that's true. TMA is a large organization, over 55,000 members. We have had in the past 5 lobbyists on our lobby team. I think 3 have retired or left, and we're replacing those people. But yes, we still have 4 or 5 lobbyists. I'm on the Council on Legislation, so I get to work with them on the various issues and participate at that level. The TMA is very important in medical politics in Texas. The TMA monitors approximately 1,700 to 1,900 bills each legislative session
Wow.
and works actively on 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 of them, depending on whether they're with scope of practice or budget or end of life, various issues that we cover. And so it's a very active, very important organization.
And that's always an interesting balance too, right? If you think about it, it's very similar to the whole parallel of ACR and AMA. I mean, the ACR is involved in the AMA. It's very important that we have representation within the AMA. And, I do feel like, though, that folks often feel like, well, TMA will take care of it, so I don't have to get as involved, or AMA will take care of it, so I don't have to get involved with the ACR. And as you know, while we're all pretty closely aligned on almost all of the same issues, there are times where there are conflicts, and I think that's where it's important that we also have our own efforts and our own focus as a specialty society, as opposed to just always relying on that big 800-pound gorilla that you are referring to. The one thing that you mentioned, or you kind of teased a little bit, is you have funny story, or you know something that maybe you've done in the past regarding advocacy that was either a great memory because it was a success, or maybe a bad memory because it was something that you weren't successful with. But do you have a particular story or two from your involvement that you think our audience would like?
Well, I think the low dose CAT scan screening for lung cancer is an interesting story that gives longitudinal explanation of what I'm talking about with participation in organizations. The study that showed that low dose CAT scan screening for lung cancer significantly reduced mortality was terminated early because of its success. And I happen to be participating in the American College of Radiology, the Texas Medical Association, and which you mentioned, the AMA. I'm also a delegate to the AMA on the ACR delegation. On ACR Hill Day, one of our asks that particular year, around 2014, was for support for the passage of reimbursement for low dose CAT scan screening for lung cancer. On the day we were testifying, the MedCAC, the Medical Evidence Development Care Advisory Committee, came out against that. However, the USPSTF, United States Preventive Services Task Force, came out with a grade B favorable recommendation. So that put us in the dilemma of CMS not being advised to cover it, whereas under Obamacare, private plans had to cover it. Well, this was for like patients 55 to 74 years of age, I believe. So the older patients were not going to be covered. So 2 days after the ACR Hill Day, I was at the TMA meeting. I was on a reference committee, and the same issue came through the reference committee. So I was able to educate the reference committee as well as my county medical society caucus in support. And so the TMA came out in support of that as well. And then a few days later, or a month later, I was at the AMA meeting in Chicago, and the same issue came up with the resolution, and the reference committee voted to refer that for study. Well, that happened to be during the 90-day comment period for
Hmm.
CMS, where we could make a big difference if
Yeah.
the AMA came out in favor of it. So why is this my favorite story? It's because when we heard what the reference committee had to say, the ACR delegation got together, and I'll never forget Dr. Bibb Allen summed it up very well. He said, if the AMA can't support evidence-based medicine, then what are we doing here? And that's when we got organized and motivated, and we got the reference committee recommendation overturned, and it was passed by the AMA during the comment period. So we were able to get the AMA to support that. And CMS subsequently did approve paying for low-dose CAT scan screening for lung cancer. So that's kind of my best favorite story.
Yeah, and you mentioned a pretty historical name as well with Dr. Allen. I mean, you want to talk about someone who can kind of charm you with his southern hospitality, but he's very influential too, and he's pretty savvy and knows how to kind of push the right button. So, it's also interesting, and this is kind of really a challenge, I think, for a lot of the folks who are involved in advocacy. Is you mentioned your involvement with TMA, TRS, ACR, AMA, and sometimes I'm like, do you work like the day job at your practice? Because all of those activities in and of themselves are extremely time consuming. And I think a lot of people don't truly realize how much prep time is involved. I mean, I know when you all go to AMA, there are a lot of things that you need to go through in preparation for knowing what is going to be coming up for discussion and how you want to interpret it and make a recommendation or whatever the case may be. And so this is not an insignificant amount of time. I mean, this is a very big commitment. And what you find is if someone's involved in one or two things, they're involved in five or six things. And then just trying to find that balance in their life because yeah, you do have a day job, joking aside. Oh, and you also have a life, probably a family and other activities you like to do. Maybe you're like Dr. Ellen Boken and you're getting into pickleball or whatever else you like to do on the side. And so, yeah, that's a challenge, right? Because everyone's so busy already as it is. So, how do you kind of deal with that prioritization of your time and trying to figure out how you're going to stay involved and still be able to do all the other things that you need to do?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think I would say it's kind of like, boiling frogs. You put them in the cold water in a pot and slowly turn the temperature up. And when I first started showing up and participating, that's all I did was show up and listen and then give my opinion. But as you have said, as you get further along and further involved, it becomes more and more work, and there's a lot of prep.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that at night and on the weekends. I my days off. I'm actually went part time some years ago. So as I got more and more involved and less real need for income, I was able to go spend more time, away from work. So I'm actually working about 65% time right now in my practice. So I use a lot of my free time to do these things as well as fun things that I do in life.
Well, that's great. So, and it helps to have the support of the practice too, right? To have the flexibility. And I know a lot of times practices will say, "Hey, look, we don't want to do it. So if you want to sign up and volunteer for the short straw, go for it. Just let us know what we need to do, whether it's give to RADPAC or do a call to action response or whatever it may be, because they're busy. And if they maybe they're not intimately interested in it, but if you are, they'll kind of defer to you and let you run with it. So it's kind of cool that big practices for the most part are pretty supportive of having one or two type of liaisons, if you will. But when we're looking at all of these activities, there's a lot of misconceptions about advocacy. And I'm just curious from your perspective, what are ways that we can get better interest and better participation with our radiologists at all different levels of their career with our advocacy efforts?
Well, to answer your question, and I've been thinking about this for a while, is multifaceted for people in practice for a while. I think it's education, communication, asking them to get involved in simple things such as the Radiology Advocacy Network.
Hmm.
I think for the younger physicians, particularly residents, I think we need to get them involved. And TRS actually had a strategic planning retreat last summer, and that's one of the things we want to do is to get the residents educated by having lecture in their residency program on legislative. So one of the things we do for residents at the TRS is provide TRS sponsored Rutherford Levante Fellowship and TRS Rant Moorfield Fellowship slots that are funded through the TRS. We also have a TRS Lobby Day at Advocacy Day at the Texas Capitol. And so we're going to work on getting the residents more involved. And particularly, we want to organize and reinvigorate our RAN at the state level so that we can send out call to action. So that's pretty much what we're doing is trying to educate, communicate, and facilitate the opportunity for physicians to participate in advocacy.
Well, and I'm very biased, but the Levante Rutherford Fellowship that we have done for years in our government relations office in DC, it's a week long program. And like you said, every year we have one, sometimes we've had two folks from Texas. I think one may be sponsored by TRS, one just comes through our program, applying directly to the program. But giving them 4 days essentially of time on the Hill, of time at fundraising events, time with our staff to sit through a lot of different strategy meetings and conference calls and meetings with coalition members of other different organizations in DC, and it gives them really kind of the behind the scenes how sausage is made, and it's a really good opportunity for them to see firsthand and the exposure of how it really works and the value of it. And we've come to find out that those who have gone through that program are ones who say after the fact, "Hey, I'd love to get on the RADPAC board. How do I get involved in the GR commission or other ways at the college?" And so I think what TRS has done by supporting those slots for those fellowships has been really, really important and really instrumental in our success that we've had legislatively, at least at the federal level, for many years. So along those lines, I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what other recommendations would you have for someone who wants to get involved, whether it be a resident or someone maybe like yourself who was a little bit further along in their career until they started to really start to have interest in doing this type of advocacy work?
Well, there are multiple opportunities to get involved. Just not to promote myself, but I did write an article when I was president of the Texas Radiological Society talking about advocacy, and I expanded that into a three-part series when I became president of the Tarrant County Medical Society in 2020. And those articles are available online and actually address that in some detail in the Tarrant County Medical Society articles. And it all sums up with where I started: just show up, participate, get to know people, see what's going on, find areas of interest, and then volunteer. And it includes both the state and national, and if you have a local or county radiology society, but also general organized medicine, Tarrant County Medical Society for me, Texas Medical Association, and AMA. So all those organizations, you can be a member. You don't have to participate like I do, but you can be a member, and that will generate support in and of itself. But importantly, they all have PACs that go along
Mm-hmm.
with them. And so if you contribute to the PACs and get involved in the PACs, then you can also have more direct input. And that's what I've done in Texas. I'm actually on the executive committee now of the Tex PAC, the PAC for the TMA, as well as involved with the TRS PAC by virtue of being legislative chair for our committee. And you got to combine both of them. You have to have all the support of the organizations who make the policies, and then you have to support the PACs who then go out and try to get the policies implemented. So that's what I would say. And I would just refer anybody that really wants to know. I've been asked this question before, and that's one reason I wrote these articles. If you read the articles, it gives you a pretty good explanation of how to get involved and what you can do.
And the other thing that's interesting, I feel like going back to the misconceptions about advocacy, I feel like oftentimes people say, well, I don't really want to give hundreds and thousands of dollars to all these different PACs. But if I give $20, that really doesn't have an impact. And it really does. And I feel like also the same can be said with grassroots or other types of advocacy. Well, I don't have a ton of free time. I have a young family and kids, and I'm busy, I'm stretched thin in addition to my work obligations, and I don't have hours and hours each week, but it takes 4 clicks at the most to do a call to action. But that in the aggregate with everyone else doing those call to actions adds up. And so I feel like oftentimes people think there has to be like this big boulder that they splash into this tiny little puddle to have a real impact. And really, it's not the case. I mean, it can have an impact if it's done over time and you're doing it consistently. And I think that's something that we have to continue to work to educate folks on that, if you want to be like Dr. Childs, please, we would love to have more of those clones. Go out and spread the word. But knowing that not everyone can have the time that you dedicate to it, but even if they just give a little bit, that really still has a lot of impact. And I think that's something we need to continue to educate people about and to recognize people about their service. So, what we usually do to conclude our podcast is a little lightning round of questions. It's kind of an interesting way to get a little bit of insight into our guests. We've known a lot of the folks that we're going to have on our podcast for many, many years, and including Dr. Childs, we've known you very long period of time. But we don't always get to know kind of insight of what makes you tick, what you really like other than advocacy. So we'll ask some of these rapid fire questions, try to keep it as short as you can on your side with the answers to make it more fun. And we'll go through these really quick. Favorite food?
Well, being in Texas, it's Mexican food and barbecue.
Now, are you team taco or are you team barbecue? If you had to
Half and
choose.
half, it's hard to choose.
Okay.
Probably
Okay.
Mexican food.
Okay. Can't go wrong with either. How about favorite place to travel?
By far and away, that would be Captiva Sanibel Islands off of Fort Myers in Florida.
Favorite hobby and activity?
Lately, it's been my brother's ranch that I bought 2 years ago when he decided to move to Boston, Massachusetts to be close to his grandkids. And that's actually where my grown kids and their families are putting our emphasis now is on the family ranch.
Favorite saying or quote?
That's a good question. Let me think a minute here. I think my favorite quote would be show up, participate, know the issues, be friendly, admit when you don't know, offer to get the answer, and build relationships. And eventually you will make a difference.
I like it. That sums it up. And the one thing that I tell my kids all the time, and so I'm glad you mentioned this, is it's okay to say you don't know. And in particular, it's really okay to say that to a member of Congress and say, hey, look, I don't know the answer to that. I don't have the data for that, but let me get back to you and with that information, because I would rather give them accurate information than kind of a half guess that might not be 100% accurate. And then they try to use that information when they're on the House floor or when they're talking to a colleague or a staff member about a particular issue. So I think that's a really critical part of that saying and quote, because everyone in our society nowadays has to be 100% right all the time and they have to be the fastest to make that decision. But it's okay to take your time and really make sure you got the information properly done. So I like that a lot. Well, Dr. Childs, I really appreciate your time with us. Thank you. Thank you for all you do from the Washington, D.C. office when it comes to all the advocacy that you're doing at the federal level, at the state level. We really do appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ted. It's been a privilege and an honor to be here with you today. I appreciate it and I look forward to seeing you soon.